Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Biblical Unlocks. And today we're going to be taking a look at how unchecked anger can undo years of faithfulness. How one mistake can actually have drastic consequences. A bit like how when you squeeze toothpaste out of a tube, you can't put it back afterwards, right? And that's what we're going to see in 1 Samuel chapter 25. We're going to see the foolishness of Nabal, the courage and wisdom of Abigail, and David's near-fall into vengeance, and how God sometimes sends someone to stop us from becoming the very thing we hate. And I'll give you one immediate action to help you choose wisdom when anger feels righteous in this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now let's get a little bit of context into the chapter. Okay, so 1 Samuel chapter 25 begins with the death of Samuel and then quickly turns to a conflict between David and a wealthy man named Nabal. Okay, so David's men had protected Nabal's shepherds in the wilderness, so David politely asks for some provisions during a feast. However, Nabal insults David and refuses him, and furious, David prepares to kill every male in Nabal's household but Nabal's wife. Abigail intervenes with humility and generosity and profound wisdom, and David relents, and Nabal later dies under God's judgment, and Abigail becomes David's wife. Very odd sequence of events, but the chapter actually sits between David sparing Saul twice. We're going to see that in 1 Samuel chapter 26, and we saw that in 1 Samuel chapter 24. And what it shows is that when you're resisting revenge against strangers can often be harder than resisting revenge against enemies. In David's case, it's like he's doing the opposite of what we would expect, right? He's losing his cool against a stranger, but then he keeps it when he's talking to, when someone who's trying to murder him comes towards him, he doesn't show revenge, right? It's very strange, but it's interesting. Someone had to be in his life to prevent him from acting in this way. Okay, so let's read verses 1 to 13. The focus here is going to be Samuel dying and Nabal insulting David and David preparing revenge. So the person who this book is even named after is now going to perish. Okay, let's read. Verse 1. Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him. They buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David got up and went down to the wilderness of Paran. Verse 2. There was a man in Maon whose property was in Carmel. The man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. He was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail. The woman was clever and beautiful, but the man was surly and mean. He was a Calebite. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, "Go up to Carmel, and go up to Nabal, and greet him in my name. Thus you shall salute him. Peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. I hear that you have shearers. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we did them no harm, and they missed nothing all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore let my young men find favor in your sight, for we have come on a feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son David." When David's young men came, they said all this to Nabal in the name of David, and then they waited. But Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants today who are breaking away from their masters. Shall I take my bread and my water and the meat that I have butchered for my shearers and give it to men who come from I do not know where?" So David's young men turned away and came back and told him all this. David said to his men, "Every man strap on his sword," and every one of them strapped on his sword. David also strapped on his sword, and about 400 men went up after David, while 200 remained with the baggage. Okay, so why did we have to mention Samuel's death right at the beginning of the chapter? And I think it's really important because Samuel was a prophet, he was a priest, he was a judge, he was the one who anointed David, he is the one who rebuked Saul, And his death was actually the reason why there is a power vacuum and why Saul became king, why the Israelites demanded for a king. And the chapter begins again with this level of grief and uncertainty about what is going to happen next. Who is going to speak wisdom now that Samuel is gone? And it's not David, it's going to be Abigail, as we'll see later. Now, we see Nabal as well. Nabal is a wealthy, harsh, and arrogant person. And his name actually means fool, okay? So David's men have protected his shepherds, almost like unpaid security guards, right? But David doesn't demand payment. Instead, he asks for some generosity during a feast. But Nabal responds to him by saying, "Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse?" So he's actually contempt. He's showing contempt. And it's funny because he deliberately speaks of David as if he were nothing, right? And this is a level, it's coming from a heart of pride. So what he's doing is not right. But why does David become so angry? He becomes so angry because Nabal actually attacked David's honor. So David spared Saul in the previous chapter, and we're going to see in the next chapter, but he nearly massacres Nabal for insulting him. And it's interesting because the wounds to our pride are harder to forgive than the wounds in other areas. He's not seeking justice. David isn't seeking justice. That's not just. He's angry, and he's so angry that he's willing to turn aside God's covenant to kill him. But he doesn't fail. David almost failed, but he doesn't. Because what's interesting, even though he passed the test with Saul, right, that doesn't mean he won't fail again. He can pass test after test after test. You'll just keep getting more and more. And just because you've passed in the past, that doesn't mean you're going to be faithful in the future. So we are all reliant on the Lord in some sense. The Bible is not cake for special occasions, right? It's bread for daily use. We all need this. Otherwise, it becomes very easy for us to stumble. Okay, let's read verses 14 to 35. Abigail is going to intervene here. We're going to see her wisdom. And she's actually one of the wisest people in the Old Testament, right? And what we're going to see as well is David's going to listen and turn back. So let's read. Verse 14. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, "David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he shouted insults at them. Yet the men were very good to us, and we suffered no harm, and we never missed anything when we were in the fields as long as we were with them. They were a wall to us both by night and by day. All the while we were with them, keeping the sheep. Now therefore, know this, and consider what you should do. For evil has been decided against our master and against all his house. He is so ill-natured that no one can speak to him." Then Abigail hurried and took 200 loaves, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep ready dressed, 5 measures of parched grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs. She loaded them on donkeys and said to her young men, "Go ahead of me, I am coming after you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she rode on the donkey and came down under the cover of the mountain, David and his men came down toward her, and she met them. Now David had said, "Surely it was in vain that I protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belonged to him. But he has returned me evil for good. God do so to David, and more also, if by morning I leave so much as one male of all who belong to him." When Abigail saw David, she hurried and dismounted from the donkey and fell before David on her face. Bowing to the ground, she fell at his feet and said, "Upon me alone, my lord, be the guilt. Please let your servant speak in your ears and hear the words of your servant. My lord, do not take seriously this ill-natured fellow, Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your servant, did not see the young men of my lord, whom you sent. Now then, my lord, as the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, since the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt and from taking vengeance with your own hand, now let your enemies and those who seek to do evil to my lord be like Nabal. And now let this present that your servant has brought to my lord be given to the young men who follow my lord. Please forgive the trespass of your servant, for the Lord will certainly make my lord a sure house, because my lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil shall not be found in you so long as you live. If anyone should rise up to pursue you and to seek your life, the life of my lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living under the care of the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the hollow of a sling. When the Lord has done to my lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you prince over Israel, My Lord shall have no cause of grief or pangs of conscience for having shed blood without cause or for having saved himself. And when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your servant. David said to Abigail, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you to meet me today. Blessed be your good sense, and blessed be you, who kept me today from blood guilt and from avenging myself by my own hand. For as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has restrained me from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, truly by morning there would not have been left to Nabal so much as one male. Then David received from her hand what she had brought him. He said to her, Go up to your house in peace. See, I have heeded your voice, and I have granted your petition. I hope you noticed something about Abigail, because she is wise in every way. She acts quickly, she takes responsibility, she speaks courageously, and she talks David out of sin, right? And she lifts up his eyes, and she reminds him that God is going to make you king, and you should not stain your reign with this bloodshed, because the Lord himself will fight for him. This is wisdom, right? And she calls him my Lord, my Lord, my Lord, so many times, not to flatter him, but she is wisely, again, lowering the temperature. She's saying, don't do this, because she's respecting him in this way. And she talks about David's future kingdom, right? I feel like we sin when we forget who we are and where we're going, right? And I think we need to remember what we feel right now is not necessarily what we want to become. And that's so important. And what does David do after seeing all of these things? He listens. He doesn't struggle to accept correction. Who is this woman that she's come up to me? Who is this? The wife of the guy who has just insulted me. Why would I listen to her? No, he doesn't say that. He says, Blessed be God, Abigail, and Abigail's wisdom, because you have kept me from blood guilt. One of David's greatest moments, because he allowed himself to be stopped. And this is important because a truly dangerous person is not the one who becomes angry, it is the one who refuses to be corrected. David's greatness is in his teachability. He's not perfect, but it is in the fact that he recognizes when he is wrong. Okay, let's read verses 36 to 44, final part of the chapter, and we're going to see some interesting things. Nabal dies, and Abigail will become the wife of David. Verse 36, Abigail came to Nabal. He was holding a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk, so she told him nothing at all until the morning light. In the morning, when the wine had gone out of Nabal, his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him. He became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Blessed be the Lord, who has judged the case of Nabal's insult to me, and has kept back his servant from evil. The Lord has returned the evil doing of Nabal upon his own head. Then David sent word to Abigail to make her his wife. And when David's servants came to Abigail at Carmel, they said to her, David has sent us to take you to him as his wife. She rose and bowed down with her face to the ground and said, Your servant is a slave to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. Abigail got up hurriedly and rode away on a donkey. Her 5 maids attended her. She went after the messengers of David and became his wife. David also married Ahinoam of Jezreel. Both of them became his wives. Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Palti, son of Laish, who was from Galim. Okay, so why does God strike Nabal down? Because, again, God is proving the principle that David lives by. Let the Lord judge between me and you. David waited, and God acted in accordance with this principle. Now, it's not according to David's timetable. If it was according to David's timetable, he would be the one to strike him down. But it's interesting. David was just in this particular way. And what we see is that the chapter actually vindicates restraint, holding back, letting the Lord decide in situations like this. And Abigail becomes David's wife because she was the woman who preserved David's kingdom, and now she gets to become a part of David's kingdom. And her wisdom actually protected his future, which is interesting. And the deepest lesson of this entire chapter is that God will send people into our lives to stop us from becoming someone we would regret. David nearly exchanged years of faithfulness for one moment of revenge, and Abigail was the one who actually interrupted that story, and David was humble enough to be corrected. Okay, let's see how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. So 1 Samuel chapter 25 presents two radically different responses to an insult. We see the pride of Nabal and we see Abigail's wisdom. And David was tempted by vengeance, but he was redirected towards mercy through Abigail's wisdom. And through Jesus Christ, we see the same pattern, but it reaches its fulfillment, as we've said multiple times. Jesus is the true Son of David, the ultimate Son of David. He is insulted, he is mocked, he is spat upon, he is rejected. But does he even think to retaliate? No, because he entrusts judgment solely and entirely to the God of Israel, the Father. As we read in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 23, "When he was abused, he did not return abuse. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but he entrusted himself to the one who judges justly." Jesus is the fulfillment of David because he conquered evil, not by retaliating and then being later stopped by someone, but rather through sacrificial love. He died for the people who mocked, insulted, and spat upon him. And that is the true gospel message. That is the Christian message. Okay, so what's a really important lesson that we can learn from this chapter? There are going to be people in your life who are intentionally placed there, right? Who are intentionally placed there in order to prevent you from becoming someone you will later regret. That is what we're seeing with Abigail. Abigail went into David's life, right? Went into David's life, and she prevented him from committing an atrocity that would have completely marked, he prevented him from becoming what Saul has become, right? She prevented that. Abigail prevented that. And now, if we look at our own lives, there are going to be people in our lives who prevent us from becoming something unrecognizable. Now, do we listen to those people? Can we even recognize who those people are? This is an important question, because if you are insulted, right? If you're insulted, what is your reaction? Are you defending righteousness, or do you defend your ego? Do you let God judge between your matters, or do you let yourself judge between these matters? And do you let people correct you when you're about to make a mistake? Do you humble yourself and listen to the advice of others? Or do you always have to put on your ego and your pride and then let that get in the way of you and your relationship with God? Alright, so that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. We learnt, again, that Samuel's death marks the end of an era, and the rise of wisdom from an unexpected source, who is Abigail. And Nabal's pride nearly provokes David into a catastrophe, but he's humble enough, right? David is humble enough to listen to Abigail, and this actually prevents him from sinning. So David's greatness is shown in his willingness to actually accept the advice of others. Okay, so next time we're going to move to 1 Samuel chapter 26, where David gets a second chance to kill Saul, but he refuses again. And we're going to unpack the spear, the sleeping king, how Saul is sleeping, and why mercy is repeated even in this case. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate the show and follow. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.